with the Committee of the Whole for April 20th. We'll start with the roll call, please.
Miller,
Here.
Rosado,
Here.
Beck, Knopf,
Here.
Jansen, Aaron,
Here.
Wolf,
Here.
O'Brien,
Here.
Callahan,
Here.
Meitzler, Malay,
Here.
Ewer,
Here.
Cerrone,
Here.
and McFadden.
Here.
We have 11 out of 14.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. And just for the record, Alderman Beck did email me today saying she was unable to attend the meeting tonight.
Thank you.
So we'll go to item number 2, just to please speak directly into the microphone for the BATV recording. Item number 3, approved minutes for March 9th, 2021, March 16th, 2021, and March 23rd, 2021. Anyone care to
So
make a
moved.
motion? Moved by
Rosado.
Rosado,
Second.
second by Knopf. Roll call, please.
Rosado,
Aye.
Beck, absent. Knopf,
Aye.
Jansen, absent. Barron,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
O'Brien,
Aye.
Callahan.
Aye.
Meitzler, absent.
No,
Malay?
Meitzler's here. Aye. Hello.
Oh, hello. That was an aye?
Yes, aye.
Thank you. Malay,
Aye.
Ewer,
Aye.
Cerrone,
Aye.
McFadden,
Aye.
and Miller.
Aye.
Motion carried 12-0.
Okay, item number 4, items removed, added, or changed. Does anyone have anything? I believe just item number 8, we're going to go and probably do that next Committee of the Whole meeting.
Correct. Thank you.
Anything else, anyone? Okay, it's item number 5, matters from the public for items not on the agenda. Do we have anything, Laura?
No, no one has their hand up.
Okay. Item number 6, Resolution 21-035R, grant sign agreement for Windmill Grill and Pizzeria. Is that Alderman Callahan?
Yes, that's me. Thank you. This one and the next one are both nearly identical, except for location. The city does have a downtown signage assistance program in which we set aside $1,000 or 50% of the actual costs. And in this one and the next one, both of the signs are in excess of that amount. And normally, what would be done is the sign grant approval process would take place prior to the installation. But this one and the next one have already installed their signage, but they meet all the eligibility. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Laura, but I think, or Scott, I think we have had this happen on an occasion or two before where the signs and the investment were already made, but the process was confirmed to be valid on the eligibility for
Yes.
for those, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Initially, when we looked at both of these applications, we had thought, well, you know, since they had already been installed, that they wouldn't be. But then when we looked at past cases, we found that that was not true, and that we had indeed offered grants as long as it was a project that was in process, and they had talked to us about wanting to apply for those grants before the project had begun. The paperwork just took some time for them to complete.
Right, and on both of those, it should be noted that they've already gone out and spent the money with hopefully the guarantee that they would be reimbursed, but it's just an indication that they are willing to invest into the community to begin with, right from the very beginning.
Right.
Does anybody have any questions? Scott, do you have anything else to add that I did not cover?
Actually, Scott is not here, but Anthony was going to represent both of these grant applications. Anthony, do you have anything that you would like to add?
Alderman Callahan, thank you for mentioning all this for both Windmill Grill as well as Ziggy Nail Salon. These are both in TIF 3, so we're very happy to have these businesses coming to Batavia. And again, you did a great job covering the information for what the purposes of these grants are for both Windmill Grill and Ziggy's Nail Salon. So we're looking for you all to approve this and send it to council. Both these signed grants. Thank you.
And Marty, I just might add that they have met all criteria, so they're in pretty good stead.
Correct. And if anybody has not utilized these businesses yet, please do. I know I definitely have for Windmill, and their food is phenomenal. I'm sure Anthony will agree with me too.
Oh,
you've already
Alderman
been.
Callahan, the food is phenomenal. No
Yes,
doubt.
it is. Yes, it
No
is.
doubt.
If there are,
This is Mark. I just have a question.
go ahead.
Because yes, this has come up before. And it seems this and some other things, I don't know if we're just not good at advertising them to potential new businesses in town that, I don't know if we're losing business because, people don't realize it. Oh, hey, I can defer some of the cost. Maybe it's not a ton, but it could be a lot to a new business. I just don't know. Is there something we need to do differently to ensure that we're not playing catch up on some of these things?
Yes, so in this case, both of the businesses, we had been talking to them about our grant programs before, but I have recently received feedback from other businesses that would like to see us do a better job of communicating our grant programs. Certainly, if you go to our website and you put in the word grants, it'll take you right to the page that talks about all of the business grants that we have and what you need to do to qualify and be eligible. But what I'd like to do is get that information on both the Chamber of Commerce website as well as Main Street's website, and then also at least once per year, host a webinar for local businesses to attend where, Main Street and Chamber are getting the word out, and anybody who's interested in hearing about the city's grant programs has an opportunity not only to know about what the grants are, but maybe question how they apply to their businesses.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Laura.
Sure.
Laura, does
Yes.
either one of those organizations have like a kind of an orientation for new businesses that come?
Not per
Like
se.
here are some things like, almost, and that may be part of the job of the economic developer.
It is.
Of, being able to create something like that where they kind of give them an orientation and then they're saying ahead of time, try to think of things beforehand, like what is something common that all businesses think of, and almost put together like some little package for them.
Yes.
Or as you said on the website, and you say to them, hey, once you kind of get some things settled, here's a website with resources.
Right.
And continue to keep pushing them there, to let them know what resources are there.
Absolutely.
Laura, and I believe many times Main Street has also been good on trying to get some of the word out on that too, from my past experience and what they've done over there also. Anyone else have any questions? Is the applicant here to talk about their business tonight or no?
No, they are not.
Okay. So then I will recommend approval to City Council, Resolution 21-035R, a grant for a sign agreement at Windmill Grill and Pizzeria.
Second, Ewer.
Motion by Callahan, second by Ewer. Roll call, please.
Callahan?
Aye.
Meitzler?
Aye.
Malay?
Aye.
Ewer?
Aye.
Saron?
Aye.
McFadden?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Rosado?
Aye.
Beck? Absent. Knopf?
Aye.
Chanzit? Absent. Barron?
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
and O'Brien.
Aye.
Motion carried 12-0.
Thank you. We probably could put that on the consent agenda unless, Anthony, you want to reach out to them and see if they wanted to speak about it.
I'll be happy to reach out to them, Alderman Callahan.
They don't have to, but if they would like to.
Okay.
Okay, item number 7 is Resolution 21-36-R Grant Sign Agreement for Ziggy's Nail Salon. Alderman Callahan?
The same exact scenario, same exact qualifications. They also have a sign. I have not utilized this. However, my fingernails probably would need me to because I don't have them very nice. Does anybody have any questions for staff on this issue? Then I would recommend approval to City Council, Resolution 21-036-R, grant for a sign agreement at Ziggy's Nail Spa.
Second, Ewer.
Motion by Callahan, second by Ewer. Roll call, please.
Callahan?
Aye.
Meitzler?
Aye.
Malay?
Aye.
Ewer?
Aye.
Saron?
Aye.
McFadden?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Rosado?
Aye.
Beck, absent. Knopf?
Aye.
Chansett, absent. Barron?
Aye.
Wolf?
Aye.
And O'Brien.
Aye.
Motion carried 12-0.
Thank you,
Thank you. And
gentlemen.
the same thing, that could go on consent unless they wish to describe their business.
Okay, we'll skip item number 8, and as we said, and we'll go to item number 9, discussion Illinois energy legislation. So do we have Andrew here from the Batavia Environmental Commission?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Hello, Andrew. How are you tonight? Thank you for coming. And Andrew, you had sent us a response to our that Gary had sent out, just our talking points for the siege legislation, and you had some editing done to that. Would you care to talk to us about that, please? Are you on mute, Andrew?
Let me try promoting him to a panelist. And see if that
There he
helps.
goes. Hey, Laura, will anyone else be here from the Batavia Environmental Commission? Just Andrew?
Just Andrew.
He just drop off?
Yeah, it looks like he just dropped off. Maybe he's trying to log back in.
Maybe he's trying to do something else? Yeah.
Right.
So Gary, should we wait for Andrew, or should we have Gary just get on the way with it?
Oh, I think here he is,
Well-
he's coming in,
All right, good.
yeah.
He's back.
And isn't there a phone number option too?
Am I here?
Yes.
There we go.
Yes. Now we can hear you, Andrew.
I'm sorry about that.
That's all right.
So I think that the Environmental Commission just wanted to, let you know our thoughts from our rudimentary analysis of what was presented to us. And we only had a few days to look at it. So, we didn't get to do a deep dive into some of the background. And we appreciate that Gary put a lot of work into drafting those statements. So, that was our draft initial responses. We are happy to study it more and discuss it with folks as necessary. But we felt we owed, the city and the council at least a first glance reaction.
Okay, thank you. So we'll just leave it to you to just start maybe supporting some of your editing, please.
Sure. So, I can speak to certainly the selections we made. And it seemed like, Gary, correct us if we were incorrect, but it seemed like some of the differentiation in the first item was between nuclear energy support and not. Is that correct?
Through all the policy statements, the ones lettered A are consistent with the CEJA legislation. The ones lettered B as in boy are generally consistent with the Clean Union Jobs Act, and then C is kind of a miscellaneous, as is D. So the first item, with regards to what Andrew just said in nuclear, CEJA calls for 100% renewable by 2050, and that renewable in the context of CEJA legislation is wind and solar. It does not include nuclear. And then item number B as in boy, their big push obviously is to support the nuclear, so they have the nuclear with new carbon mitigation credits for the nuclears, which has probably been widely reported by now as the next bailout, if you will, for Exelon nuclear plants. So I'll turn it back over to you, Andrew.
Great. Thanks, Gary. Yeah. So for that reason, the Environmental Commission chose option B under renewable energy for the first set of choices because we weren't quite sure that we wanted to leave the door open to nuclear energy. There's a lot of debate amongst the environmental community about the merits of nuclear energy because obviously the radioactive waste it produces. But we also wanted to be fair and give it a nod for the potential for carbon-free baseload generation that we've talked about a little bit. Further down for the second option, obviously we recommended letter A. Letter B, we did make an edit there because we do think it is important for municipals and cooperative utilities to have a renewable energy portfolio standard and mandate. We just think that is crucial here. And, we totally respect and advocate for Batavia to manage its own system. And so we don't really want to, go around that, but we do feel that it would be good to maintain the standard for renewable energy. On the next one, we do, we do feel like perhaps the CEJA legislation or some sort of legislation in front of the state would be the best way to address Prairie State's continued operation. It seems like there's been a number of conversations over the years of how can we exit Prairie State and do it in a responsible manner. And if we can do it in a way through one of these pieces of legislation that is good for the city, we feel that this would be probably the cleanest exit chance we're going to get. Otherwise, we feel like we the city could be tied up in Prairie State for a while, and Batavia and NIMPA don't have a majority voice to take the existence of it in one direction or another. So we wanted to, just put that forward that, if we can influence this process and get something good for the city, let's not overlook that point either. Obviously, the next one, Prairie State is a big CO2 emitter, and there's not much debate about that and its causes of global warming. So that was an easier one for us. As far as legislative funding goes, we understand that new fees and taxes may be a necessary piece of the legislation. So I wouldn't say that we're willing or enthusiastic about paying more. Nobody wants to pay more, but we really want to do the right thing here. So that's why we made just a slight tweak to letter A of the legislative funding options. And then obviously we wholeheartedly, are a proponent for electric vehicles. We've been trying to, find ways to encourage that adoption throughout the city over the past few years. And, we think that electric vehicles are a huge environmental, impact from, making the air cleaner around our kids' schools to everything else within the city. So the more EVs we can get on the road, the better.
Okay, well, thank you, Andrew, I appreciate it. I just want to say, Gary, Laura, and I talked about it, and we thought it would be best to invite, the Batavia Environmental Commission to come and just speak with us while we have this discussion, so we can have kind of a unified approach when we do speak to the representatives of Siege, those gentlemen again. But just for clarity's sake, the council will make the final decision on that, and no one else. And so, but that's it. But Andrew, please feel free to, as we're going to start the discussion, if you have any points you wish to make, please feel free to join in the discussion with us, please. And with that, I'll turn it over to Gary to get us rolling.
Okay, thank you. The direction that came out of the last couple of meetings was for tonight, for the committee and council to discuss and put together, hopefully codify what your guidance is on the city's positions, so that those positions can then be communicated to our state legislators. We've had a couple of meetings where we've talked about background information and the information within the various pieces of policy, and tonight's setup is to try and walk through various statements so that council can express its opinion on those statements, and then those statements can be used to ultimately formulate what will be the formal correspondence to our legislators. This is done in the same format that City Council used, that Laura had set up for strategic planning, where there are topics, large topics. Then within those large topics, there are kind of different options to choose from as far as policy statements. And then, as I said last time, even those options to choose from can be further tweaked and a sentence dropped or a sentence added, however City Council would like to do it, in order to truly customize them for what City Council wants them to say. So this is really just a starting point for a conversation, by no means etched in stone or meant to be anything final. As I had just said a moment ago, and I think it's important for everyone to understand, there's a half dozen plus pieces of legislation out there now floating through Springfield. You as a body have really only discussed a couple of them. There are other ones that are really kind of specific to certain areas that wouldn't impact us. Vistra has got one out there where they want to be able to get incentives for converting their coal plants to solar facilities. And literally the legislation is about Vistra and their plants. So, I mean, it doesn't impact us directly. So that's why we haven't focused on that one. Just an example. So anyways, I wanted to say that, and that, as I said earlier, option A has generally been, or not generally, it is, items pulled directly out of CEJA. Option B is consistent with the other act we talked about, the CUJA, the Clean Union Jobs Act. Option C is a little bit of miscellaneous. And finally, before I start reading these, I think it's very important that everyone understands that with a half dozen pieces of legislation and the governor's office set to submit their own piece of legislation, there is no one piece of legislation that's going to look the way it does today when we get to a final product. Every single piece of legislation is gonna get merged or modified in some manner to create a final product. So that's why I think it's good to focus on policy statements as opposed to the third line and third paragraph of this legislation says this, and we want it to say this, because we're not there yet. That's still coming, and that really is gonna be led by the people in Springfield to decide how they wanna build their legislative, draft from. We're just a little premature in trying to parse language of the drafts that are out there today. All right. So under the general topic of renewable energy, there's a couple of different options because there's a couple of different aspects of this. It is important to understand that in the context of CEJA, renewable energy means wind and solar. CEJA is silent on the nukes, basically, period. CEJA doesn't talk about the nukes. They don't provide any support for the nukes. They don't say how the nukes are going to be eliminated. They just say that by 2050, they want 100% renewable, and renewable is defined in the legislation as wind and solar, so they don't really say how the nukes are going to go away, but they're very clear about fossil fuel generators. So this first statement does say that the city of Batavia supports a transition to 100% renewable generation in the state of Illinois by 2050. As an interim step, the city supports the elimination of all fossil fuel generators by the year 2030 and all nuclear generators by the year 2050. Should I read through like A, B, and C?
Just go through, yeah, I would say we'll do renewable energy first, then we'll go, option 2, then we'll hit Prairie State.
Yeah.
And do its option 2, so we'll just do one section at a time.
We'll do A, B, and C, and then I'll stop. I mean, you
Right.
guys can talk about those.
Thank you.
Option B, the city of Batavia supports the goal of achieving 100% clean energy generation in the state of Illinois. Batavia recognizes the importance of carbon-free nuclear generation and supports the creation of new carbon mitigation credit program. Batavia encourages the development of renewable energy generation in the state and supports the creation of new renewable energy credits. I probably should have, and I will try to, and I just forgot. I'll try to explain these things before I read them as opposed to afterwards, but so you notice there's a difference between 100% renewable energy in the first one and 100% clean energy in the second one. And the reason why that was done was because of what I had mentioned earlier, and that the nuclear proponents wanted to create that difference so that nuclear could be included, whereas renewable does not include the nuclear. So there's a difference there between clean and renewable. New carbon mitigation credit program is essentially the incentives to keep Exelon's 4 other nuclear plants operational. And then there are new renewable energy credits that would be issued through the state that's consistent with, generally in the big broad sense, it's consistent with what CEJA is proposing for new energy renewable credits. But the difference is that the renewable energy credits under the CUGA program are really paid for by ComEd's ratepayers. I mean, that's kind of who's paying for all that stuff out of the second one. ComEd and Ameren's ratepayers. Then the third one, clean energy. I don't think there's anything else in there I need to explain. So the third one says, City of Batavia supports a goal of achieving 100% clean energy generation in the state of Illinois. However, Batavia is also concerned about the negative financial impacts that would result from the untimely closure of the state's traditional generation resources. As an alternative, Batavia supports a measured and deliberate transition to clean energy that includes an all-the-above generation strategy. This strategy would ensure that the state's generation portfolio remains diversified and resilient until such time that a transition to 100% clean energy can be achieved. I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, so everyone heard that. Anyone want to start off with comment or questions for Gary? So Gary, just briefly, well, we have Alan. I'll let Alan speak first. Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think, in my mind, the last one that Gary read probably is closest to where I believe we should be, because I think until we know more of the specifics of how it's all going to flesh out by the time it gets voted on, really need to be concerned with the impacts to the city and the ratepayers. And part of that will be, I think, mitigated with how we stage the phase out of what we have, not just bringing up a hard date at 2030 and saying, everything, carbon based is gone by then. But how do we phase it out in a way that, one, doesn't cost the ratepayers and the government that much as much in tax money as it does to be able to make this palatable to the people and achievable by the means that we have out there, and what we can develop between now and then. So, I don't want to see us, come out with a statement that says, yeah, we're going to go ahead and we're going to agree with you that this needs to be gone in 9 years, but not have a realistic and financially sustainable program to do that. If we were to add up all these taxes and everything like we've done and the fees that would get us to that 2030 date, that could decimate our local economy and our tax base to the point where we wouldn't be able to sustain that to that point. So that's my big thing, is I want us to be able to project that to the legislators, that's the reality of, I think, what we have to deal with at our level, being a municipal utility. It may be a different perspective from ComEd or Ameren, how they look at this than we do. And that's what I think we have to get across to our legislators, that we agree we need to get there. We just need to do it in a manageable way.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank
Anybody
you.
else?
Hey, Mike, this is Mark.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark, please.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. It's very much along the lines of what I was thinking. And I apologize for missing last week's meeting and talking about this in more detail. I feel like, because of a position where I say something to that effect, what we have in number 3 is that people look at me and say, well, you don't care about the environment. You're a bad person. You should want this to happen. And look at the social cost of not switching faster. And I agree, we should go. I mean, look at history. We used to burn wood for energy and heating, and we don't do that very much. There are still obviously people that do it, but it slowly phases out over time as technology catches up. And our technology is not caught up. And maybe in 2030 it will be caught up, and it'll then make sense. Oh, yes, now we can start turning things off because now it is much more affordable. But 2030 is 9 years away. I just don't see it. We are moving pretty quickly, but we have to be in a way that we're not going to create a different set of burdens on the overall economy of Batavia, the state, the federal government, by just ramming things down really, really quickly before the technology is ready for it. And I just don't think it's there. Totally support electric vehicles. I could probably use an electric vehicle because even when I do work, I have a very, very short commute, and I would probably never put gas in it, or have a hybrid, or have to put gas in it, or anything like that. So there's certain things of it that would work, but I'm just afraid of a lot of things, and not just the city of Batavia, if we're sitting there trying to do things faster than is technologically possible right now. That's it.
All right, thank you, Mark. Anyone else? Mayor, please.
Yeah, I would just like to say, number one, I'm in total agreement with what Alan and Mark just said. I sit here with wonder as to how we think we're going to do this any sooner than reality really comes. And I look at just in the last couple of years, the number of new things we brought into this city. Body cameras for the police department. We brought in a whole new radio system for the TRICOM operators that's got apps on it. They're connected to computers, and it's all wonderful technology. But the one component, every one of them needs electricity. So we're going to be using a lot of electricity, and the one conversation that really is stuck here with me was one that Alderman Wolf made either last meeting or the meeting before about, I think everybody's supportive of the idea that we head toward electrification of the auto world or the transportation world, but that is going to be a huge demand on the electrical system once we transfer all the cars over to having them be electrified. I mean, that's going to take a lot of power. So when somebody tells me, well, we ought to take the nuclear reactors out, or we probably should shut down the coal mines, I can understand what they're saying, but in all honesty, I cannot believe that we can do this quickly, and that, we're being overly optimistic, I'll call it that we can try to get this job done any sooner than probably 2050. I think we should do it, but I don't think we can hurry this along. And there's just, think there could be real dire consequences if we rush this thing through and suddenly we find out, we've already seen some other states that had big power problems and everything else, and there was a lot of different reasons why those happened, but I'd sure hate to see us with the demand that this area by itself needs for power is significant, and this town needs for power. So I think we gotta be real cautious and careful here walking along, and this just isn't some pipe dream that we can snap our fingers and this will roll over and solar and wind will take care of everything and we don't need to worry about it. I don't believe that. I think it would be erroneous public policy to promote that.
Thank you, Mayor. Andrew, you have your hand up, please?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question of Gary if he knows the answer. Is there not some element of FERC or other regulatory bodies and PJM, the grid operator as a whole, to provide for safeguards and even having the authority to order plants to run if there is an electricity shortage projected? And how would these potential pieces of legislation interact with those, with the powers of those groups? Just from the entertaining the question of, power availability.
We talked about this a bit last week. There's two regional transmission organizations which operate in the state of Illinois. The northern part of Illinois is in the PJM territory, and PJM has a construct, their rules, if you will, that require a certain amount of capacity, excess and available capacity. PJM is a little more formal in their approach towards ensuring generation resources. So I don't know that there's as much concern in the PJM territory, and also with these pieces of legislation, none of them calling for the nuclears to shut down. There's basically our lights are running tonight probably on nuclear power. There isn't as much concern in northern Illinois on generation resources or generation availability. The rest of the state, so kind of south of I-80, is in the MISO RTO, and MISO doesn't have the same construct as PJM does. In fact, we had a little debate last week about the letter that was drafted from MISO to the governor's office. MISO supports state-level planning of resources. MISO does have a must-run type order, but it's not meant to play traffic cop, to balance out state legislation. I mean, MISO wants the states to do their own planning and to come up with their own resource capabilities, and and that's been my concern from the beginning. And I had again made this statement last week that if all the baseload generation in southern Illinois is turned off, there isn't enough generation in southern Illinois to supply our needs. So we will become a generation importer. We're going to be taking generation in from surrounding states and basically importing carbon over wires, because those surrounding states will still be having fossil fuel. That goes to Alderman Muir's point about technology and engineering fact. I mean, that is what will happen in southern Illinois If there isn't sufficient baseload generation, we're gonna be importing from other states. So I don't know if that answered the question, but that's,
Thank you, Gary. Anybody else have any comments on this one topic here that we're speaking of? Then I'll just put in my 2 cents. I agree with Alan and the mayor, and I just think that topic A, I mean, letter A here, that is a CEJA-backed deal. We'll never get there, not by 2030. Letter B is CUJA, that's, you know, the union deal that talks about a little more diversification. I honestly believe it's letter C is in the best interest of Batavia. Because it speaks of diversification up to 2050 or until, you know, the renewables can actually meet base demand. And I don't see that happening anytime in the near future. I just don't think they have the land available to them yet. And like Gary says, if they don't have the land and they're still trying to do this legislation, then we're going to have to import, if CEJA is successful, we'll have to import other carbon from other states, carbon-generated power. I don't see that they have the land. I don't see that they have the technology down yet. I know they're saying that they do, the gentleman before us. I don't know if, not that they intentionally were misleading us, but if that's the veracity of that, if that's truthful or not. And I just want to make clear too, as we said last week, and to Mark's point, I don't think anyone is thinking, Mark, that you're not for clean energy throughout. I have to say again, we are all united in support of clean energy and a clean future for our Earth. I think everyone is on equal footing. There's no one with the moral high ground here. It's just how do we get there is what we're looking to talk about. So I guess, Gary, that'll end what I have to say. We'll go to the next topic then.
I guess we would prefer to have like a specific direction from city council on those.
Okay, you know, we can just, I guess, ask everyone, all the council members, just, we can start with Alderman Miller and see how he wants to go about it.
I do agree that C would be in the best interest. I do, however, not like us creating policy statements. For the simple fact that we can say whatever we want. It's more of an ask list. I don't know how else we could just say
Yes.
that. Is that what a policy statement
That's what
is?
we're
Yes.
getting there. Yeah,
Yes.
we gotta know what to ask for, though.
Right.
Okay.
You guys are policy, you guys establish policy for the city?
Right, yeah,
So these become what you guys establish as policy for the city, and then those policies will then drive the ask statement as to what we're gonna ask for in order to meet your policies.
Do you understand
So
that,
each
Keenan?
statement, you're gonna have like something surrounding it, like based on this statement, we're going to ask that you allow us to diversify and, you know,
yeah,
just some changes to the bill that we are looking to have made. Kind of like what they said last week, where you guys have some asks that you have to go back to your representatives to ask for to make it.
right, yeah. And
Right.
that's all, I'm just trying to get to the point of, they could still tell us no.
Yeah.
And we could get
Absolutely.
nothing,
Right.
regardless of what our policies are.
Correct.
Correct,
Trying.
yeah.
Yeah.
We're letting it be known.
All right,
And your ask statements, and all, probably, and again, the 14 of you will decide what the final ask statements are, but I'm guessing the ask statements will be fairly high level. They're not necessarily gonna be at this stage, you know, again, to go back to my identification,
Gotcha.
you know, modify this
I
sentence.
just didn't want it to seem like we were demanding from them,
Oh, no.
because that would not go over well.
But
if
they
I-
wanna hear what.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
do.
yeah, I got you.
I think, Keenan, when we come up with what we think we want here
Yeah.
as United Batavia Front,
I got
and
you.
the people from CEJA come, those gentlemen come, and they say, well, you know, where are we at? We tell them,
Yeah.
this is what we're looking for.
Gotcha.
And then they're gonna counter to us too. They're gonna say, well, we don't know if that's gonna happen in the CEJA bill or not, but it's what we're asking for, it's what we want.
I got you.
We're looking to protect Batavia, they're looking to protect
The greater.
the
right.
CEJA legislation, because I believe they helped write some of it, so.
Right. Yeah.
Jennifer, can you speak into your microphone, please, more?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question really quick? Like, when they went through and developed this, I understand they had hundreds and hundreds of meetings with people. Unfortunately, they didn't hit Batavia and those people that were tied in with Prairie State. From what it seems, they were more addressing the bigger utilities. Am I understanding that correctly?
You gotta understand,
Yeah.
they're just one group of one
Right.
legislation. There's no magical power about the CJ folks.
No.
Right.
They don't have any more sway in Springfield than Vista does with their plan, or the Path to 100 people do with their plan, or the CJ folks do, CJ folks do with their plan. They're all, right now, all on an even footing at the State House, the House and Senate. They just chose, the CJ folks chose the path that they chose, to involve, and they're, a lot of them are grassroots-driven, environmental organizations who put together that legislation. They hired consultants such as RMI and the National Resource Defense Council to provide them with information to support their legislation. Who they wanted to reach out to or didn't want to reach out to, that was their own strategy as to how they chose to do that.
Well, because I've listened, like, I've been sitting in on so many conference calls for like an hour trying to listen to this. Please tell me something magical, like why I should be supporting this when I'm still stuck here in the background worried about our ratepayers, the effects that this will have. And, obviously they came out last week and said, they finally heard us and said, oh yeah, you guys are kind of stuck with some things. And that's what I struggle with this whole thing is, I get what you're saying, and nobody has said anything magical, and they all say the same, it's the same platform over every conference, and it's great, and it gets people all excited, but then in the back of my mind, I'm still going, but for Batavia and all the other people in
Right.
these, it's a struggle for us because it's not that easy. We just
Right.
can't say we 100% support it.
When you go to, the individual websites for the organizations who have come to the meetings to speak with us, each one of those has, a mission of what their organization aims to accomplish.
Right.
And I think that those, and some very admirable and laudable goals that they have, they may not be the same or aligned with your role as an alderman and having the constituents here and being in a municipality that has a municipal electric utility. And then you've got the separate role of the state legislator who is in the power of deciding ultimately what this legislation is going to look like. And so the groups that we had come and join our meetings, they are talking to legislators about the things that are important to them.
Right.
They also know that the city of Batavia will be speaking to its legislators about the things that are important for us. What I think was good that came from our discussion, as you said, I think there was an aha moment that some very severe financial consequences are on the horizon for Batavia if this legislation passes. And I think that they realize that those things will be influential with the legislators that represent us. And so it would be in their best interest, perhaps, if they want to see the overall goals of the legislation accomplished, to maybe advocate in favor of some of those things that would mitigate the financial impacts to us.
Let me ask one more question here. These asks that we're asking of the CJ legislation, some of these are general enough that they could possibly cover some of the other ones we haven't talked about yet that are also floating out there, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, the other pieces of legislation that we haven't talked
Gotcha.
about yet, yes. So like, if there were to be other penalties for municipal owners of
No,
coal plants.
I'm just talking about
And
the other
others.
ones Gary was talking about, besides CJ and Kuja that
Yes.
are just not as on the forefront right now.
Mhm.
So like in a perfect world, yes, I would love for B to be part of our thing, but in the interest of Batavia and our specific financial issues, C is more likely where I would fall.
Tony Malay, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. So my take on this, if I were not an alderman, I'd be fully supportive of A. But having, knowing the implications that it will mean for the city makes me have to look at that a little deeper. And Gary, you've been a great resource. I do believe that we do not have the capability in this state to be able to transition to total renewable energy on this timeline. So I don't think that's feasible. And for B, while it's keeping nuclear, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think you've indicated that most of the nuclear is in the northern part of the state, and the southern part of the state would not be able to sustain itself on just clean energy. Because they wouldn't have, they would have to import. So as an alderman, and I'm, looking out for our, the residents of the Fourth Ward, the financial impacts are of a big concern, but also C, from what I know now, is more pragmatic and doable. The part of the problem, I can hear it now that, you don't have any set dates in there. There's no, you're just kicking the can down the road. But, I think our purpose here is to give some direction. And so for the ask that we have, this is a negotiation. And when I'm negotiating teacher contracts, we don't go in there with our bottom line. And so, this idea, and I like the last part of C, that the strategy would ensure that the state's generation portfolio remains diversified and resilient until such time that transition to 100% clean energy can be achieved. I could almost see that being until 100% renewable energy can be achieved and not just clean energy. But, the likelihood of of Springfield coming and saying, yeah, you're right, here's everything you want. That doesn't happen, but I think we need to, this is a good starting point, but also force the discussion of what is doable. Because I do agree that on that timeline, I don't see wind and solar power in the whole state when, GM's said they're going to go all electric cars. It's not just about replacing energy, it's about creating a whole lot more energy for what we know is coming. So I would have to go with C at this time.
So thank you, Tony. And I think to clarify one thing also, and not that I know of it, but I've read of it, is that, the nuclear fleet that we have in Northern Illinois, it's all being, aged, and it's about, the average age is about 45 years old. So they're reaching their end of life. And so I don't believe there's on the horizon to build any more nuclear facilities. And so as distasteful as it may be for people, and coal is going to be in the future for that reason, especially for base load energy. There's, wind and solar don't have the technology yet to feed our base load. So I hope that helps you with some of it also. Alderman Rosado, I thought you may have had your hand up also.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm in favor of C as well. I think right now, nothing is law yet. So I think I'm in total agreement that these are our policy statements, because I think with CJ and everybody else, that's their policy statements, and everybody's got their own ideas. This is going to be, it's going to be a totally different version that comes out at the end of the day than I think what CJ is proposing to us right now. So like I said, I like C. I think 2030, ending all fossil fuel generators that's a very aggressive task. I think that's probably one of the most aggressive tasks in the United States. And I go to some of these different websites too, and I said this before, Signage on their website says that their renewable energy is going to be solar panels, and they're going to put up 40 million of them in the state of Illinois. And I just don't know where they're going to put 40 million solar panels and how we're going to be sustainable by 2030. And, you know, the wild horse in this whole conversation is we want to make sure that we've got this money invested that, hey, I'm all for going total renewable if we get all our money back and they take over the payments and make sure that this doesn't hurt Batavia or anybody else that is involved in Prairie State as well. Because this was a law change. This wasn't anything different when we decided to get into this. This is strictly done by a law change. So I think that on our way there, if it goes faster than what we want it to go, then I think the federal government and the state of Illinois got to set some things straight with Batavia and the other users of Prairie State before we totally become non-dependent on that as for our power.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Alderman
Mike,
Beck?
one quick
Yes,
question.
go ahead, please.
Yeah, and C, we refer to clean energy. Would that be our policy that we would support clean energy, or we would support achieving renewable energy?
I think clean energy, it doesn't need to be renewable, as long as it's clean and doesn't foul the air and doesn't destroy the future of our earth for our children and grandchildren. Clean energy is it's just a broader term.
Yeah, well, as Gary explained earlier, the renewable energy being wind and solar, clean energy would include coal, or no, I'm sorry, nuclear. Which we know is aging.
Right.
I wouldn't support building, replacing those at this point. I think the C strategy is about buying more time to be able to get there, being more reasonable and pragmatic about getting there. I think, me personally, I would like to see 100% renewable energy. And I understand it can't happen. It's not, that's why we've got a statement that doesn't lay out any dates. But eventually that's where I feel we need to go.
I would have to agree with you on that, Tony. It would be renewable that again, in the future when the renewables can meet the base load and meet whatever loads are required, any kind of spikes in it, that they can do it. And, I think what's worse than coal energy is nuclear, because we have those waste rods, the waste from nuclear for 1 million years. I mean, the whole future will be dealing with those. So I think that we're looking to get rid of nuclear also eventually, just as a country, as a human race, is that it's not good for the future. So.
Should we change?
So I would, Gary, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, about changing clean energy to renewable energy in C.
That's what I was just going to ask the question, if there's consensus to change that to renewable. And I'll just say what I said at the Green Night Out meeting again. I keep referencing that. You all missed a great program if you never saw that.
You did a great job.
I talked a little bit about the technology, and it's been said several times here tonight. In 2021, the technology doesn't exist yet. I'm not sure the technology will exist by 2030, but I'm confident that someday the technology will exist so that our grid, instead of running on spinning turbines, which is how it runs today, which is big hunks of metal that are spinning, our grid can eventually run on electronics. And everything can be done, electronically, which would then allow intermittent sources, wind and solar, to serve all of our power needs, because the electronics could handle that. We're not there yet, but we can get there. And things like battery storage will also help tremendously with that. So That's up to city council if you want to change that. I would agree that technically, probably one day will come when that is achievable, 100% renewable.
All right, so I'll put it to the council. If anyone is opposed to making that change from clean to renewable, and that's the bottom line of the C, please raise your hand.
And the first line, it's in
First
two
line,
places.
too, yeah,
Oh, the
there's two
first line also, thank you. I guess, Gary, you got your direction on that.
Okay.
So that's, but we still got to go through, just had
Yeah, I didn't know if you
Alderman
wanted to,
Wisoto.
like, tally people's votes or ask everyone what they thought, however you wanted to do it.
Yeah, I was going to ask everyone and just kind of crawl through it,
Okay.
okay? So Alderman Beck is not with us, so Alderman Knopp.
Hi, thank you. I'm with Tony on this one. It's an issue that's important globally. We've got to do everything we can to combat climate change. But how do we go ask the people that live next door to pay more money for it? That's a struggle, and that's one that bothers me. There was a little bit of a conversation a few minutes ago, and an important point was brought up. And it was, we wondered if they had an aha moment about what this legislation's doing to Batavia now that they've met with us a few times. I believe Mr. Scown's in the audience, and I'd love to ask him that question. Have they seen something different in how this impacts Batavia? And would that necessitate them going in and making a running change to this bill before it goes any further?
Well, you know what, I'll grant you that. I thought this was going to be just between the Batavia folks, but if Bill Scown's here, because we're going to get a decision made amongst all of us, and then bring it to Bill Scown and the other gentleman, JC, but if he's here and wants to chime in with a one time, please do so.
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you, Bill.
Okay, so we knew there was going to be a cost issue for Batavia. As we talked further with you over the two meetings, we got a better idea of the size of the cost issue. And certainly we learned before and during the last meeting, due to some of your fixed price deals and limited negotiation ability with some of your larger customers, that price couldn't be spread evenly over the entire customer base. So yes, we had an aha moment, and we realized that there was going to be a need for some mitigation for you guys to sign on to something. So you did school us. We are open and looking for your direction on what kind of mitigations required.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Appreciate that. Joe?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that it really is a two-way street right now, and that gives me a lot of faith in moving forward. With that change that we just agreed to letter C here, I think that's where I'm at as well.
All right, thank you, Joe. Alderman Chanzit's not with us. Alderman Wolf?
Yes, I'm in agreement with C. I think, we have to be able to logically and realistically get there. And I think that's the one that best fits that parameter.
All right, thank you, Alan.
Thanks.
Alderman Barron?
I'm in agreement with C, with the renewable energy change.
Okay, myself as well. Alderman Callahan?
I'm a B, and for that, I know, as has been said, I think everybody is trying to make the considerations of ratepayers and residents into effect. But I take a different tact in that, based on what I heard, other residents and ratepayers are willing to absorb some of the costs because they feel that it's a necessary cost, a necessary expenditure because of the larger effects down the road. So the way that I think it is the way that I believe some of the residents that I've heard from and kind of the environmental commission weighing in on it. And for me, it goes back a little bit towards what Susan Russo had said. There's a lot of other costs that we will keep if it is remaining open for longer periods of time. And that comes with cost to residents also. So I weigh that and weigh other discussions with people, and I'm a B.
All right, thank you, Marty. Appreciate that.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, please.
Marty, I understand where you're coming from there, and I think I'm close to being a B, but there's one statement or there's one sentence in letter C, especially after hearing Mr. Scown's response. Batavia is concerned about the negative financial impacts that would result from the untimely closure of the state's traditional generation resources. We put that in a policy statement. It sets the basis for the ask of mitigating those costs. And that would be the only differentiation I see in my mind between B and C. If B had a statement like that in there, I would be on to B, but setting the basis for the ask of giving us some relief on the financial impact is what drove me to C.
Yep, I get that. And that's where a little bit of my thinking is also, I get to be out of the alderman position and you get to speak a little bit as a resident soon. So those would also be my positions as a resident.
Okay, thank you again, Marty and Joe. I'll go to next, Alderman Meitzler.
Yeah, I appreciate the nod there to go more towards the renewable as opposed to clean. I think that is the direction we want to set as far as a policy. I don't think it's enough to just go to clean and then call it done and then, even rely on, some other future, direction there. I think we need to be proactively setting that finish line farther down the road to keep charging forward towards the renewable. I have to say I'm still in C at this point. I would like to be more aggressive with that, but I do very much. I've definitely been hearing the concerns about just pulling the plug on that someday here, and having to deal with the repercussions of what that would mean. I'd like to get safely or as safely as possible for the majority to a more renewable energy source, but I think we are unfortunately stuck with this deal for a while still, so I'm still in C.
Thank you, Elliot. Alderman Ewer. You there, Mark?
Sorry about that. It was muted. It was unmuted, then I muted it and started talking. So I'm definitely for C. I do like the adding the renewable statement in there instead of the way it is right now. And I'd love B if money wasn't a factor anywhere. I still think that maybe it's borderline right now, but the ROI on the renewable stuff right now just isn't there, and I think it's going to be not just a financial impact to Batavia, it's going to be a financial impact to this nation if we try and rush this and try and force the issue. It will happen. We just all have to, unfortunately, be patient. And unfortunately, it's not a good trait of our current society, is there's a lot of impatience that everything has to happen now. So I like having these statements without years in them because of the fact that we can't predict the future. Something else may come along that is better than solar and wind, and everything's going to change at that point too. So I'll stick with C.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Alderman Cerrone.
I'm a C. That's it.
Thank you, Nick, for your brevity. Alderman McFadden.
Let me get my notes here. I've got a couple of pages worth. I'm C also for a lot of the reasons already stated.
Okay, thank you, Drew. So I guess then we'll move to turn the page, right, Gary?
Next one, option number 2.
Okay,
On that same page. The first part is a bit of a technicality, but I need to try and explain it. The way the state law is set up, we as a municipal are governed under the Illinois Municipal Code. We're not governed under the Public Utilities Act. In fact, the Public Utilities Act specifically, in the definition, specifically excludes us from that act. So it's really not, it's kind of poorly written to exclude us under that act and then govern us under that act. So that's why I make references in here to saying, and all three of these, saying that we don't feel we should be governed under the Public Utilities Act, because that's not the proper place to govern us, unless you want to completely change the meaning of the Public Utilities Act. The other aspect in here is the Illinois Commerce Commission. Again, and I've said this before to you, we are governed by the City Council, who is accountable directly to the voters. And the citizens of Batavia literally can go to the Board of Directors. They can appear before the Board of Directors every single week to express their concerns. Whereas the Commerce Commission has oversight authority over the investor-owned utilities, and we, again, as council will say this, not me, but it's that concern about having the ICC now having regulation over our local utilities as opposed to the respective city councils. So,
And Gary, something also very different in investor-owned utilities, that's really the words I want you to focus on there. Those companies have a profit motive. The City of Batavia's municipal electric utility does not have a profit motive. We're basically a not-for-profit, in fact, and we are just covering our own expenses with the rates that we are charging to the users.
So I'll dive in. Item number A, the City of Batavia supports a renewed effort by the state to implement stricter renewable energy portfolio standards. The city supports a transition to 100% renewable energy by 2050. The city supports a requirement for all utilities, including municipal and cooperatives, to meet the new portfolio standards. However, the city objects to any regulation of municipal utilities under the Public Utilities Act. Regulation of municipal utilities should remain within the Illinois Municipal Code. Item number B, the City of Batavia supports the transition to a greater reliance on renewable energy with the goal of achieving 100% clean energy. The city supports the state's effort to create 35 million new renewable energy credits by the year 2030. However, the city opposes any state mandate on municipal or cooperative utilities to meet specific renewable energy portfolio standards. The city objects to any regulation or oversight of municipal utilities under the Public Utilities Act or by the ICC. Municipal utilities and cooperatives are governed by their local councils and boards, and as such, they should be permitted to establish renewable standards that best meet the needs of their communities. And then finally, item number C, the City of Batavia supports the goal of achieving 100% clean energy generation in the state of Illinois. However, the city opposes any state mandate on municipal cooperatives to meet specific renewable energy portfolio standards. The city objects to any regulation or oversight of municipal utilities under the Public Utilities Act or by the Illinois Commerce Commission. And municipal utilities and cooperatives are governed by their local city councils and boards, and as such, they should be permitted to establish renewable standards that best meet their local, their communities.
well, sounds pretty similar.
It does. So item number A basically says that we're going to support 100% renewable by 2050, and that we also support a requirement to have to meet new portfolio standards that would be established. Item number B says that we're supporting the state's establishment of a new renewable energy program, but we don't want the state to mandate us to meet those new program standards. And then item number C basically says we support the bigger goal, but we don't want to, we basically want to have local control over how you get to that goal. That's my paraphrasing.
Okay. We'll start around the table again. Alderman Miller, do you mind if you go first, or you want me to pick someone else?
I don't mind. As we discuss these, it might change anyway. As of right now, I feel like we should be at B.
C?
B. B as in boy.
Okay. Alderman Rusotto.
Yes, I am a B as well.
Okay. That would make it Alderman Knopp.
B.
Can I jump in?
Please.
Just for the city council, just to try and my engineering mind working. That first sentence, City of Batavia supports a transition to a greater reliance on renewable energy with a goal of achieving 100%. Should that be then changed to renewable energy?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
because
think we're all in agreement on that.
Yeah.
Right,
Yes.
that's what I thought. Okay.
I've already crossed it off on my list.
Oops, no, my pen just went out, but I'll get there. You all know what I want.
There you go.
No, I should be good. It'll come back. Sorry for jumping in.
All good.
Oh, but you just made my engineering mind click in, Gary. Sorry. And the first one we talked about, what we liked about it was there were no time limits on it. There were no dates thrown in.
Yeah.
On this one, we're
Thrown in dates.
supporting the effort to create credits by the year 2030. Is that an achievable target for them? Is 2030 realistic? Do we want to put a date in there, or just that we support the creation of 35 million renewable energy credits?
So I can
Please jump in, Gary.
really, it's the state, the Illinois Power Agency is going to be issuing these credits as an incentive for the construction of new renewables. And those credits under the Illinois Power Agency are, in the big picture, funded and paid for by the ratepayers of the utilities that are supported, or that are under the Public Utilities Act, so your Amerants and your ComEd. So to answer your question, is it very doable? Yeah, it's definitely doable. They can name however many new renewable credits they want to name. And the cost ultimately just goes to the ratepayers of the investor-owned utilities. So that's where the tug of war will come in. But it's not a technical or a technological type issue. It's simply a business type issue.
Who's paying?
Who's paying? Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we were consistent with artificial timelines or artificial deadlines.
Yeah.
I'm still B.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Alderman Wolf?
I guess I'd be a B plus. I'd like to see us add into that, to make sure that the ICC does not have control over us.
That is in B.
That's in there.
Right.
Oh, it is B? Okay.
That's in B, yeah.
We had so many of them off that I couldn't remember if that was in there or not, but that's my main thing on there, is to make sure that they don't have that control over us.
Yes.
So I'm a solid B then.
Okay, thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Alderman Barron?
I'm just trying to compare the two, and really the only difference between B and C is that statement about the 35 million renewable
Correct.
energy parts
Mm-hmm.
by 2030. So what we're saying is that we agree that we would produce.
We agree that the state, we would support the state's efforts to go ahead and create
Okay.
more renewable energy credits. It's not going to impact Batavia,
Okay.
but we're supportive of the overarching goal, so therefore we're supportive of those state efforts.
Okay.
And if the investor-owned utilities have the ability to utilize those credits to build renewables and put the cost onto their ratepayers, we're being supportive of the creation of more renewable energy resources.
Yes.
B.
B it is, okay. I myself am a B. Alderman Callahan?
A or B, either one.
Okay, just for United Front's sake, we'll say a B. that okay?
Sure.
Alderman Meitzler.
B for brief.
Be for brief.
Alderman Malay.
I have problem with B because it's basically saying, don't tell us what to do in terms of getting to renewable energy. If that's the approach we're going to take, how can we be taken seriously to say we're towards getting to renewable energy? We can't say the state has a policy, but you parts are exempt from having to get to renewable energy, because basically, the part where, however, the city opposes any state mandate on municipal or cooperative utilities to meet the specific renewable energy portfolio standards. Well, if there's no, to me, there's no accountability then. I don't know if I'm saying that's how I'm thinking it, but I'm leaning towards A, because it's not, we made the in the previous statement that we agreed on, we basically ruled out or addressed our financial impacts in that statement. So this statement, which doesn't address financial impacts, none of these three do. Again, we're saying we do support renewable energy. It does have a date in there, which I know we avoided that in the previous one. But if we don't have a uniform plan in the state of Illinois, all of this is for naught. There has to be, it has to be shared sacrifice that everybody's in on it. Now, the A does still preserve our right to be under or protect us that we still be under the municipal code. So I'm with A on that.
I think one of the strategies of B that and C that we were using was to advocate for a not one size fits all type of mandate, that given the fact that we have purchase power agreements that are in excess of what we actually use, makes it difficult for us to then buy more power under a one-size-fits-all type of legislation. I think we'd be in a better position today if we were allowed to have a diversified portfolio.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
But we addressed that in C and in the last one. So I see this. So renewable energy, you've got two groups. You got options 1 and options 2.
Yeah, I didn't know how best to, because there's the renewable portfolio standard, which is kind of the one we're talking about now, and then there's the state's overarching goals of how do we get to renewable energy. So they're two separate ideas, but they're both kind of under the same headline of renewable energy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I would, if C from options 1 and A from options 2 were combined as one, that, because our biggest concern in my eyes is that the financial impact it's going to have on us. We addressed that in C in the last round, but are we making a commitment? Yeah, we're on board that, as a state, we need to get to renewable energy.
So a mandate right now as proposed, and I'll stress that, as proposed, the mandate would have a financial impact on us, because we would, as Laura just said, we'd be forced to buy power right now that we don't need.
But in that our policy statements, taking them all together, we talked about negative financial impacts, and so we addressed that there. So maybe if we had a policy that included the C and A from 1 and option 2.
So Alderman, maybe
it would push the conversation, the negotiation that would have to happen. Well, how can we get there by not causing that? Maybe we need to have some hold harmless piece to this legislation, which protects a municipality like Batavia that's in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
So Alderman, maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe we say something like, we support having requirements for renewable port standards. We support meeting those requirements, but at the same time, we need to mitigate financial impacts to the city. So there needs to be that balance between, we agree that we want to get to some standard for renewables, but we don't want to do it at the sacrifice of impacting our residents financially. That's a really broad statement, but that's kind of what you're trying to get.
Or sometimes it's
Yeah,
safe harbor
exactly.
language.
And the way I look at it is, I think I've mentioned shared sacrifice, but shared sacrifice doesn't mean, well, the ratepayers in Batavia are going to get hit a lot harder than, say, West Chicago, who doesn't have this kind of arrangement that we do. That's not shared sacrifice. That means we get hit harder. But if we have something in there that, yes, we do, because I think we all do support getting to renewable energy. How do we get there? I think our policy should try to drive the legislation that does come out of this to hold us harmless, to hold us the same, cost us the same as everyone else, and not having Batavia pay, bear a bigger burden to get to renewable energy.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah. So where are we at with that statement then? We have to modify.
I think it's consistent with B, except that B contains the language with regard to the 35 million new renewable energy credits, which I didn't hear that anybody had much objection to. I think that we could probably craft a combo.
Craft an A and a half.
CAD.
Yeah.
Right, and in and out, so what we're saying, because I want to be clear on it also, is that we're going to go under the auspices or under the mandates of the ICC?
No, I don't think we want that.
We don't want that. I don't want that. I don't think it's good for the city of Batavia.
Right.
So we kind of want to maybe, again, Alderman Malay, jump in. We kind of want to self-volunteer that will put a requirement or even a requirement through the Illinois Municipal Code. But again, that requirement needs to be such that it balances financially.
Right.
That shared sacrifice.
That we're doing it, we're not being mandated by anyone to do it.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying, Tony?
Yeah, but again, if it's, we're just saying, yeah, don't worry, we'll take care of it. The bigger problem is not going to get solved.
So I think Alderman Malay, would it be accurate to say, you're saying put in standards, but have a safe harbor for situations such as Batavia with a long-term contract for more energy than we consume?
Yes.
Okay.
You're spot on. Safe harbor,
And that'll be our legislation here. in Batavia.
You guys have often said, like, what do we want to propose? That'd be
Yes.
something we would propose.
Okay. And that'll go under Title A or Title B?
Well, it's kind of an A and a half.
A and a half, okay, somewhere in the middle. So so everyone who was in support of B, do we have to go through it all again? Or is everyone good with A and a half?
I go
Like
with B plus. Sounds better.
Alan?
A plus.
Mike, I was AB, so I'm back to my original position.
Right, thank you, Marty, thanks, Alan. Okay, so we're going to say A and a half, A plus for, as Alan says, A plus.
I've got it
Okay.
written down, yep.
And I don't think that we heard from Mark and,
Well, we haven't heard from Alderman Ewer, Cerrone, or McFadden yet. Alderman Ewer?
A plus.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Cerrone?
Yeah, that's good with me.
Thank you. And Alderman McFadden?
A and a half.
Okay. All right, so look, it sounds like we now have, we're pretty complete on that. Everyone is in agreement. Alderman Malay, thank you for that. That's very incisive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to C, Gary.
And then again, this one is two kind of composite ideas under the general headline of Prairie State. And I'll just read them. The City of Batavia supports legislation to close all fossil fuel generators, including Prairie State, by the year 2030. The City of Batavia supports open and competitive energy markets and opposes any legislation that would mandate closure of generation facilities that are operating in compliance with current regulations and laws. And then C, Batavia opposes the premature closing of Prairie State and instead supports an all-the-above energy strategy that would support a measured and deliberate transition to clean energy and ensure that the state's generation portfolio remains diversified and resilient. We'll change that clean energy to renewable, and then you guys can.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll start, how about we start with Alderman Masoto?
Yes, I'm leaning towards C on that.
Okay. Let's go to Alderman Knopp.
Yeah, I'm with Mike. I'm leaning towards C.
Okay. Alderman Wolf.
I would be a C on that.
Okay. Alderman Barron.
See?
Okay. Alderman O'Brien, C. Alderman Callahan.
A.
Okay. Support legislation to close all fossil fuel generators, including Prairie State, by 2030. Okay. Alderman Meitzler.
C.
Alderman Malay.
It's a tough one for me here. I'm with Marty on A, but then I got to think back to, is that practical? Is that doable? Because I guess that's just talking about Prairie State and not all coal generation or fossil fuel generation. Taking that, I guess here's a question. The way I see it is we're on the hook in two ways. We got the bonds that we sold, and regardless of what anything happens, we're got to pay those. And then the agreement that we buy so much from Prairie State. If Prairie State closes, that piece goes away, doesn't it? If they're no longer generating.
Yeah, they're no longer generating, and we've had this discussion before.
Yes.
It's a little fuzzy in the power sales agreement, but there would have to be some hoops to jump through. But I will answer your question to say fairly affirmatively that the requirement for 55 megawatts could be negotiated away. We'd still be on the hook for all of the bond obligations, but it's not a black and white. But I would be confident in saying that we would not have to continue our obligation for 55 megawatts.
Yeah, so that's what kind of leads me, and I think I heard that from, I think it was from the Signage group, that, I think the term was a golden ticket, but I think there was clarification with that. Would that be the worst thing to have Prairie State closed? I know we've made an investment in that, and we got to pay that investment no matter what, so that's here nor there. It's that, getting out of the 55 megawatts, could be beneficial to us.
One
But
of
does
the
it
things.
jive with what we previously said? I'm thinking out loud, sorry.
No
Go ahead, Laura.
problem. I think one of the things that we have not considered in all of this, and is a huge unknown, is that if Prairie State were to close in 2030, that would begin decommissioning costs for a power plant, which I think are, I don't know what those look like, but I can imagine that they're massive.
Yeah, I don't know how it would be left, and I do not know yet either what those look like. Yeah.
But as
And
an owner, we would be responsible.
Yes.
So Gary, quick question for you. How much of the bonds left that we have to pay?
Still have
About
350
400 million?
million?
But for
They,
construction
190 some odd million, we still have
About 200 million?
roughly around 200, yeah, a
That's
little bit
still-
less than that.
That is our portion.
That is
Yes.
That's not
Batavia's
NIMPA,
portion.
it's Batavia's
it's
portion,
Batavia's
200
portion of
million.
NIMPA's bonds, yes.
All right, so regardless if we're getting 55 million or not, 55 megawatts or not, we still got to pay $200 million.
Yes,
And regardless if Prairie State stays open or not,
exactly.
we have to.
Yes.
So there's nothing we're gonna do about that. That's a fixed cost that's there.
Right, and so Tony, to your point, if they close Prairie State, and we don't have to pay for the 55 megawatts, so we're off the hook on that, and somehow we can get out of that, as Gary was saying. We got to pay regardless. We're going to pay if we're using coal energy, coal generation power or not.
We still have to procure energy and capacity.
And
We'll
pay
have to
that.
procure less energy, but we're gonna have to still procure the same amount of capacity. So Prairie State provides us with that 55 megawatts of capacity today.
Right?
That has a value of roughly around 3 to 5 million, depending on the year. So that's a cost we're going to still have to incur. It's a cost we incur today, and it's a cost we're gonna incur in the future.
Right, but my point being, though, according to the guys who came here, the guys, the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition, they Carrie Shepard, Kevin Breen, Bill and Bill, JC, they were saying that if we went to the renewables, plus we're gonna have to get our base load somehow, but if they went to renewables, it would be a lot less money.
That's the claim, yeah.
That's their claim.
Yes.
So if we can get out of, it might behoove us to look into that, right? If
That
Prairie
goes to the
State does
market
close.
risk point.
Right, it goes to the market risk, though, correct.
There's no one left in the room anymore, as to why Prairie State was invested in to begin with,
Right.
was the city wanted to insulate itself from some of that market risk.
Right,
That's why you became an owner.
right, okay. Did you get, so, moving along, I guess I'll go, thank you, Tony.
I'll mark him down
Excuse me.
for an A.
This is Peggy chiming in.
Yes,
Yes,
thank you.
Peggy.
I had my hand raised.
I'm
I
sorry.
wanted to point out that our debt pays for at least half of our capacity.
Yes.
So we would lose that and have to pay for it again if Prairie State closes.
Okay,
Oh,
That's at
okay.
that's at $4 to $5 million a year in cost that we're gonna, that's. the
we're
cost
still gonna have to pay,
We would be incurring.
On top of
on
the
top
debt.
of the debt, yeah.
right.
Okay, so, that's tied to buying electricity also.
It's for the capacity, not the
Okay.
energy.
Okay,
So there's
Gotcha.
2 parts of our electricity. We have our energy, and then we have the capacity for our total ability to provide power. And
okay,
that's something that we're required to, we have to be able to match our peak in the prior year.
Right.
And Prairie State supplies much of that through the plant and through our debt payment.
So Peggy, to offset the market risk, we're buying our capacity, and our capacity is something we buy if we use it or not.
We have to buy it.
We have to
We
buy
have
it,
to buy it,
whether we use it or
correct.
not. We have to purchase the capacity power, and then if we don't use it, it's
That
gone.
goes to Andrew's question at the very beginning as to the construct within PJM and the assurance that there's sufficient capacity.
Right.
That becomes a mandate on us.
All right, thank you, Peggy. All right,
Thank
Tony.
you.
But- so if Prairie State were closed
Right,
and they were providing anything, how does that impact us, Peggy? Is that, are we still paying that?
Yes, well, we would still be paying the debt, and we would have to go out and purchase that capacity from another provider.
Okay,
Plus the energy?
Plus the energy, yeah.
yeah, it's really confusing.
So we get to pay, and I tried to say a little earlier, we would have the opportunity to potentially purchase less energy because we don't need all of the energy. We do not have the opportunity to purchase less capacity. Capacity is a requirement that we have to meet based on our peak.
Correct.
So that 55 megawatts that would be lost, we still would have to go out and procure that. That's that 3 to 5 million, depending on the cost of capacity in any given year.
Okay. Does everyone kind of get a handle on that?
I'm trying.
Ryan, I know. It's tough.
So I guess I'll really bring it back in broad terms. If we're trying to avoid those financial impacts on Batavia or mitigate those impacts, that's definitely an impact.
Right.
Closing.
Closing.
Closing's an impact.
Yeah. Yeah.
Alderman Rosado has his hand up.
Okay, sorry, Mike, you have your hand up?
Yes. Are our bonds done in 2041? Is that when we're totally done with everything on Prairie State?
Yeah, December of 2041.
Okay. And then, Gary, if
I'm sorry.
Once Prairie State is done, what would be our capacity that we would have to purchase on a monthly basis?
So, yeah, and I that's where I thought you were gonna ask, so I didn't know you were gonna ask that question, but that's where I thought you were going. I just want to clarify, when at December of 2041, when we make that last bond payment, we've basically paid off the mortgage. Now, you still own the house. I mean, just because the bond is now paid off, doesn't mean you're not an owner anymore. So you're still an owner of Prairie State, and Prairie State continues to provide you with those assets, so that capacity continues to come from Prairie State. Does that make sense? You're just no longer paying a mortgage on it. You now own the house free and clear, and you're just getting the resources from it without having to pay the mortgage.
We still have 7.5% of the expenses, right?
Yeah, you still have the operating expenses, right? Yep.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Insurance.
Okay, so Tony, back to you again. Are you for Prairie State, A, B, or C?
I'm leaning towards B.
Towards B, okay. Okay, Alderman Ewer?
Hold on a second. C.
C, okay.
I'm still with C also.
Is that Nick?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. And Alderman McFadden?
C.
C. Okay.
I still have to go.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes,
You're
I'm
good.
sorry,
Okay.
Keenan,
No, I'm
sorry.
glad- I'm glad you-
Normally you went first. so-
I'm glad you skipped me first, because I would love for us to be an A, but in the greater good of the financial impacts of the city of Batavia and its citizens, I would have to say C.
C, okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to options
Number
2.
So as a major emitter of CO2, the Prairie State Energy Campus and all other fossil fuel generation contributes towards global warming. Batavia supports the closure of all greenhouse gas emitting electric generation by the year 2030. Item number B, the city of Batavia supports efforts to retain the state's nuclear generation, a carbon-free resource. Nuclear generation in combination with the development of new wind and solar resources could eventually enable Illinois to achieve a goal of 100% clean energy. And item number C, the city of Batavia opposes the premature closure of Prairie State. Having achieved approvals during the Obama administration, Prairie State is one of the cleanest, most efficient coal plants in the nation. Prairie State's supercritical boiler design makes it unique in the state of Illinois. With more than $1 billion worth of emissions control equipment, Prairie State is positioned to operate and meet emission standards for many years to come. So this one's in the context of emissions, basically.
Right. Okay, get started. How about we go with Alderman Knopp?
B.
Thank you, Joe, that was quick. Alderman Wolf?
I think I would be a B also.
Alderman Barron?
B.
Yeah, I think I would be a B also. Prairie State, I think when 2041, when we're done with our concerns there, we might, just for the pure sense of diversification, purchase some power from them if we're still not up to, technological standards where we need to be for renewable energy, but I'm a B. I'd like to see Prairie State close as soon as Batavia is no longer funding it all. So I'd say a B. Alderman Callahan?
A.
Thank you. Alderman Meitzler?
Still a B.
B, thank you. Alderman Malay?
I might be if the last clean energy says renewable energy.
Yes, I think we're probably pretty sure that whatever says clean is going to renewable. Correct, Gary?
Yeah, the only kind of conflict on this one is that it says nuclear generation in combination with wind and solar could then achieve a goal of 100% blank energy. And we've always been talking about renewables purely in wind and solar.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what makes this one different, and that would be clean would be the most applicable.
Yeah, I guess that in combination, does that mean for in perpetuity?
That's a good
you know,
question, yeah.
You know, that combined with wind and solar can lead us to renewable energy. Because I think that would conform with our previous policy statements about we support getting to renewable energy.
Got it. So modify B, like you just said, so that nuclear, wind, and solar can serve as that transition to get eventually towards 100% renewable.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tony.
Just for point of clarification, up in option A where C seemed to be the preference, the first statement starts out, Batavia opposes the premature closure of Prairie State. Does that still apply to option 2, choice B?
B is kind of silent on
Prairie State.
on fossil fuel in general. I mean, B is basically says that we're supporting nuclear.
Okay.
And that in combination with development of new wind and solar, eventually, the state could transition to 100% renewable, which I think can be consistent.
I think so.
We're kind of just saying silent on, but we're also at the same time saying we want to reach 100% renewable, so.
Well, if we're staying silent, why do we add it in C? Because I was going to say B with the addition of the first sentence of C. Why is it in C, but it's not really applicable?
So maybe in this case, dash C.
We probably could have that first sentence in B as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unless, again.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's Alderman O'Brien and Alderman Malay, Alderman Cerrone, to answer your question, Alderman O'Brien and Alderman Malay, I believe, both just said that once the bonds are fully paid off, they might be supportive of closing Prairie State. So if we're going to add the first sentence from B, we could do so, but maybe with some sort of caveat that Batavia
Not
opposes
premature.
closure of Prairie State
Oh.
until such time that blah, 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 blah.
Yes.
Premature is kind of an
That's it,
open-ended
yeah.
sentence. It gives a little flexibility.
Okay.
I think. I mean, it doesn't mean
It does.
2041. It doesn't mean till everything's paid off. It just means before we're ready. But that's how I read it. But that's
No, I
good
get
to
it.
talk.
I think we're right. I think we could
Yeah.
probably fold that first sentence up into B.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. That's a good point to make. Thank you.
So state that again. Which C are you?
So the first sentence of C is in cat. We're going to roll into B, and we're also going to roll into B this idea of transitioning to 100% renewable.
Okay. So is that a B plus?
We're creating a B plus, yes.
So I guess, we've been going down this and everyone was for B. Is everyone okay with those modifications that we're saying for B? Anyone opposed to it, maybe you can raise your hand.
B plus.
Peggy, I see you have your hand raised.
I think that was from before.
Yeah. Okay, so Gary, I guess you got, on that, you have your direction, right?
Yep.
Well, we got to go yet with Alderman Ewer, Cerrone, and
Too low.
McFadden.
Yeah.
B
Cerrone-
plus.
A plus, okay. And Drew?
Oh, wait, I'm muted. B.5.
Okay. All right, well, that's good. And then we got Alderman Miller.
I would like to say A because everything in that statement is absolutely true except for the year. But again, in the best interest of the city, I will go with what everybody else has as B plus.
Okay. Alderman Risotto.
Yeah, I'm for B plus as well. I just want to ask a question, Gary, on is the state actually really trying to retain nuclear generation?
Ooh, that's a multi-million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Will the state give more incentives to keep the nuclears? I cannot answer that today.
Back in 2018, the answer was yes.
Back then it was yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because, so that could be something that the state would be interested, but I know as far as CEJA, that's not an option, right?
Well, CEJA is simply silent on the nukes. They don't
Right.
mention the nukes at all.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm a B+ on this one.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. So we'll go then, turn the page to legislative funding.
Yep, overarching is legislative funding. 4 options here. Option A, as a fossil fuel generation and coal mine owner, through its membership in the Northern Illinois Municipal Power Agency, the City of Batavia supports implementation of new fees and taxes to fund the state's transition to 100% renewable energy. The city is willing to have its residents pay more for electricity over the next decade to achieve that long-term renewable energy goal. Item number B, the City of Batavia supports a transition to clean energy and the state's creation of new customer-supported, funded programs to sustain carbon-free nuclear generation. Batavia also supports customer-funded programs to expand renewable energy generation. Item number C, the City of Batavia opposes a one-size-fits-all funding approach towards the long-term goal of achieving a 100% clean energy portfolio. As an owner of Prairie State, through its membership in the Northern Illinois Municipal Power Agency, Batavia feels it is important to differentiate the fact that Prairie State's critical boiler design and more than $1 billion worth of emissions control equipment makes it unique, and Prairie State should not be treated similarly to all other coal plants within the state. And then finally, item number D, while the City of Batavia supports the state's overarching goal of achieving 100% clean energy, the city is opposed to any programs, fees, or taxes that would result in greater costs for our citizens.
Okay, how about we start with Alderman Wolf?
I think on this one I'll probably be.
Thank you.
And in the context of item number B, customer supported is, as I said earlier in the evening, that's the investor-owned utility customers.
That's who?
The Ameren and ComEd customers,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, not Batavia.
not Batavia's customers.
Okay. And, okay, Alderman Barron?
B.
B, okay. I just want to say in D, it would be clean energy, I mean, it'd be renewable energy.
Be renewable energy, yep.
Right.
I think we'll change that for whenever it's possible.
I don't know which way to go. Yeah, I would have to go with B also, just to make sure that the state or federal or state is going to fund our way out of Prairie State. I don't see that happening myself. So, but we'll put that down and we'll just go to another plan, another alternative, I guess. I'll say B, just for,
But if I remember correctly, this doesn't have any financial impact on the residents. This is more of the other power companies, correct? The B statement?
That's correct.
Okay. So it's kind of very similar to D, but this one is addressing more of the city. This is opposing anything for other citizens.
Yeah,
what
so
will
B-
happen is, if there aren't fees from the other citizens, it's going to be very difficult to move towards this. What we're saying is we understand There's gonna have to be fees, just not for our people at this point.
That's kind of what B says, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know,
B as in
until
boy.
we can get through this, and then we'll be happy to make a contribution, but understanding that for the good of the citizens, you know, we know that there has to be some sort of investment and money put towards it, we just don't want it to happen to our people right now.
Okay. I hope everyone understands it. Alderman Callahan,
I am an A with the edits that the economic or the environmental commission
okay?
recommended, because I think that's along the lines of what I think anyways. And I know I've been on along the lines of an outlier on these, but usually with kind of the environmental commission, and I'm not trying to be a foil or an outlier on purpose, but I know that when we are talking about what we believe for the greater good of the community, I'm just taking a little bit different tact that that I think a lot of people do know the economic ramifications, have weighed those, and understand that the position that we're in also has to be viewed through the lens of kind of the larger impacts, which we all do agree upon. But my votes for some of these positions are for those points of view in the community. And ever since I got elected, that was one of my goals, to see us out of this contract, out of the ownership, and going along with all the steps that we did take over the years. So it's not against a unified statement, it's just a different view.
Okay, thank you, Marty. Alderman Meitzler?
I'm the C on this one.
A C?
Sorry, B.
A B.
Sorry.
Okay. Alderman Malay?
Am I on here? Yep. So I'm looking at D here, while the city supports the state's overarching goal of achieving 100% renewable energy, the city is opposed to any programs, fees, or taxes that would result in greater costs for our citizens. I would support that one if it were greater costs for our citizens than other citizens of Illinois. In that, you know, the problem I have with B is like our previous policy is saying, yes, we got to go to, you know, ultimately get to renewable energy, but we're not willing to pay for it. You know, customers pay for that with the, you know, investor owned utilities. So I'm struggling a little bit here. Even A, you know, acknowledges that if it, you know, either A or D, I would be acceptable with if it had the provision that said that Batavia is not going to get hit harder than other citizens of Illinois. Because to me, that's the reason we're having this issue now. Is this proposed legislation is going to hit our residents more? Because I've heard it countless times that, you know, several of you have acknowledged that you've heard from citizens that say they are willing to pay more, but I don't think they're willing to pay more than, you know, the residents of West Chicago or the residents of Carroll Stream or, you know, something that holds us harmless. But to say, yeah, we support renewable energy, but someone else should pay for it. I don't think that's how we're going to get to renewable energy. So I'm struggling here. You know, A or D with edits.
Or a modification of B?
Something that maybe allows us to talk about holding us harmless from these additional taxes and fees until 2041, when then we can then allow us to buy into those taxes and fees. Something like that.
Yeah, that could be.
That's what I'm tossing in my head too, about which one of these to pick, is that, you're right, we shouldn't be asking for these things, but also saying that we want it, but we don't really want to pay for it. But if there was some sort of delayed response to it for municipalities and people in our same situation, that would allow us to hold harmless or get ourselves out of this situation and then pay for those, then put us also into that bag as well. That's what I'm looking for.
What if the challenge back to that were, why shouldn't Batavia pay the same increase as other payers in the state of Illinois?
I think what this comes down to is, you're absolutely right, Laura. I don't think that they're gonna be like, oh, you're right, we're gonna give Batavia that break.
That's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah, I think there needs to be more of where we are asking them to cover some fees for us. And I think that maybe this, there may have been some other statement where we can have that covered, and I think that's what we have to look at, you know, when we're deciding these, like, what is gonna be our ask from this, and that's a good point. Maybe we don't have an ask for this one. Maybe this one we're like,
We're just gonna,
Yeah, I guess, but where I'm at is Batavia not getting hit harder than others. And how do we get there? How do we?
But we may need to rework, we may need to re-come back on this one. This one
Right.
sounds like.
Yeah.
Alderman Barron, to your general statement, because it has been also stated in the past, just a little bit history on our two legislative efforts. Both legislative efforts took 18-plus months to put together, so it wasn't as if we're sitting in April and the legislation is going to happen like in May, for example. You know, I mean, we would have started the process a year and a half ago. Both legislative efforts that we made so in the context of trying to do some sort of carve-out for our unique situation. And in the end, both legislative efforts obviously were not successful. Unfortunately, I don't know that the state of Illinois has an overarching sympathy for like a single municipality. I think it sets a very dangerous precedent for the state.
Yeah.
So going to them, you know, saying, we're unique, give us a little bit extra or something just for the city of Batavia, I just don't know the realistic part of that at the state level.
right, but you know, like with some of the fees, you know, go to them and go, if you're gonna close this down, here's the financial impact, you know, this is gonna cost us $5 million.
Yeah, arguing fees in the big picture,
Right, exactly.
100%.
Yes.
I agree with you 100% in the big picture.
And that's what I meant.
Yeah.
I didn't mean like, oh, they're gonna be like, oh.
They still get a fee, but don't charge us
Right,
that
exactly.
fee. That's gonna be a harder lift.
Kind of going off what Laura said, she's like, they're really not going to say, oh, you're right, we're gonna feel, I mean, it would be great, but I
Great, but-
realistically agree with that. I don't think they will.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm like, this is a tough one. Maybe we just stick with the, you know, what's been written there, because we know that we don't have an ask to get us out of this.
I'll try and rework this one as best we can, incorporating the ideas of, you know, no greater pain or shared pain, hold harmless until some sort of future date. I'll try and come up with something for this one.
Thank you, Gary.
Legislative funding.
Yeah, then the
Yeah.
legislative funding, yeah.
All right, thank you, Gary. Thank you again, Tony. It looks like you've done some negotiating in your past. So we'll move on then to electric vehicles.
Yeah, and this one I would just I'm gonna take 2 minutes to provide more background, because I don't think anyone's opposed to electric vehicles. I'm just gonna go back to my example of 1 Washington Place. And what I said earlier, or maybe what I said in my head but didn't say out loud, the details are gonna be in what's black and white and written in the legislation. And what's black and white and written in the current CEJA legislation is this definition of electric vehicle ready, which requires all the conduit, all the wires, and a 30 to 50 amp fuse for every parking space, which that is what the definition says in black and white. And that would mean that for a 300 space parking garage, one Washington Place, you know, and I use the example, I mean, I'm not kidding, we basically have to dedicate a substation just to serve the amperage load from that parking garage. So there's gotta be some realistic middle ground here. I understand what the goal is, and that's where I tried to get at it in B, is that we do want to support I'll read these two, but I'll start with B because I just mentioned it. The City of Batavia supports efforts to promote the transition to electric vehicles. However, the city feels those efforts need to be balanced with maintaining and promoting economic development and prosperity, and the city opposes any regulation that would discourage new or redevelopment projects due to the costs associated with complying with electric vehicle requirements. And maybe that's too broad, but I'll go to Suncast right now. Suncast is expanding in order to increase their manufacturing, but that would require them, under the black and white language that's in CEJA, is they would have to run infrastructure and install infrastructure for a percentage of their parking spaces out there, which represents a cost to them. Maybe they're a bad example because they probably can absorb that cost, but XYZ company who's doing a service upgrade, they probably can't afford that cost. And if they can't afford the cost, then they're not going to do their service upgrade. And if they don't do the service upgrade, then we're not promoting economic expansion. So there's got to be a balance there someplace.
I wonder if we could add language to B about a measured approach, which means that we do something, we don't do
I don't want to say
nothing.
do nothing, yeah.
But maybe it's something that gets phased in over time that matches the number of electric vehicles that come into, use over time.
Kind of like a percentage of it.
So item A, I'm sorry, let me read this one.
I just keep thinking of all the parking garages down in Chicago.
Yeah.
Because they're going to have to convert those also, to, handle these vehicles.
The Green Energy movie, the guy stood under a canopy at a gas station, and he just made it sound so simple that, we'll just change these gas pumps into electric pumps and we'll be all set. Except the gas station, has a small transformer, they don't use a lot of power.
Right.
And now to convert that into a vehicle charging station, I'd have to bring in all new power and all new transformers. It's not as easy as just saying we can do it.
This is one of those statements that looks good on paper,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
to actually think through the process.
It's the engineering part of it that trips you up.
I think in the city of Chicago, when I was working down there, some of the parking garages are putting in banks of parking
Oh, yeah,
spaces,
definitely.
and they're just a percentage of what they have in their facility. They're just doing percentages because they can't afford to do all.
Downtown Naperville, some of their new garages have it. And I think we're proposing that for One Washington Place. We're proposing to install spaces in there.
Right, and just a percentage we think is gonna suffice now, and then eventually, if more electric vehicles are on the road, then you start upgrading further.
It's an infrastructure, again, yet another infrastructure issue this country is gonna have to deal with. If we want to adopt electric vehicles, there's gonna come a day where we won't have gas stations and we will just have electric chargers. Again, it's just a matter of we're not there yet.
And
Right.
Mike, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's about percentages. And I think that if we can craft something that talks about, you could stay ahead of the percentage of electric vehicles on the road. Right now it's like 2%. So to require 100% of spots for 2% of the vehicles, and even let's say in 5 years, it's 5%. It's going to take a long time to get rid of gasoline vehicles because of the fact that you cannot go and force people that can barely afford a vehicle at all to go buy an electric vehicle. So
Right.
it's something that will happen. It's not going to happen in my lifetime
But then
or
I
any of
wonder
our
if this is
lifetimes.
going to kind of push some of the people that, are challenged economically to utilize public transportation. I know that they are converting a lot of those over.
Fleets will be big.
Right.
Fleets will be huge for energy, electric. I mean, that's trains, heavy haul trucks, shipping, those are where you're gonna get into electric that'll really solve global type problems.
buses too.
Yeah, buses, sorry, that was the one where I went, I said
No, I
trains
was reading where a
twice.
school district, I can't remember where it was, but they've converted their buses to electric. So instead of having a gas pump, they have a electric pump that they.
Which is great, I mean, that's,
Yeah.
So with the electric vehicles, Gary, you'll just rewrite?
I can
Probably.
Unless, again, I never read A, but A says the city of Batavia supports new legislation and building codes to help facilitate the deployment of electric vehicles throughout the state. The city agrees that all new or redeveloped residential, non-residential, and rental properties should be required to install provisions to support electric vehicle charging equipment. And that's an innocent statement on its surface. It's when you dig below the surface that you find out what those requirements are.
Right.
That it becomes a problem. So it doesn't sound like any of us are even opposed to some sort of requirement, but maybe that requirement needs to be proportional to the adoption of electric vehicles.
Kind of like to Mark Ewer's point.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
it'll take
That's-
forever to get to fully electric vehicles.
Well, and if we know this is happening, I mean, maybe that's something we need to start looking at in our building codes.
Yeah,
As
our
far
building
as
departments are
requirements?
well aware of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like this is like the sprinklers.
Okay, Mike Risotto, you have something?
Yeah, I just put, I really didn't have a question or anything, but I think this particular option is going to take care of itself. I think there's going to be so many people out there that are going to be in opposition to this. This is a huge cost. And I can't see every building and everything being transferred to all electric right now.
Yeah, I would agree.
So I think we're going to make our statement, but I think it's going to take care of itself, that portion is not going to fly as is.
Another piece to this is, you know, all these electric vehicles and, you know, and trucks and ships and stuff, the demand is going to increase so much, it's going to make us harder to get to the goal of renewable. Because well, as we know now, we can't have renewable, you know, provide enough for base. And so it's going to be interesting.
That's where that technology will come in. I do think that, you know, we're gonna move to an electronic-based grid, we're gonna move towards storage, we're gonna move towards energy efficiency. And I think we can eventually get there, but as Alderman Ewer just said, I'm not sure if it will occur in my lifetime.
Right.
But I think that should be a good goal for our children, our grandchildren, to be able to get there.
And we can set the stage for them.
Yeah.
So, and Alderman Malay, I think, you know, Alderman Wolf has been saying that clearly.
Yeah.
For, you know, the amount of cars on the road, and we'll never be able to handle that kind of power, you know, draw. So.
Yeah.
So we'll get back again doing this, Gary, with the legislative funding and the electric vehicles.
Yes.
All right, well, that's been
Mike?
quite enlightening. Go ahead, Marty, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, if the language was more towards discussing taking requirements away and changing it more along the lines of encouraging or incentivizing, and that can be done via tax breaks and stuff like that at the state and federal level. That way, it would be another way to look at kind of the inevitability of some of it. As we've talked about, we're trying to make position statements and policy decisions for what we think in, 50 years and that way. And while it may take a long time for petrol vehicles to kind of leave, I'm not entirely sure with the way technology is changing and just the way some of the car manufacturers are adapting. Volvo plans to go to an all electric fleet by 2030. So there may be some incentives on their end that it'll take it the other way, that it'll be the choices for petrol vehicles may start to go away, and thereby they are forcing the situations. And I think that if we phrase it in a way of not along the lines of requirement, but along the lines of incentivizing, then you're encouraging it and kind of embracing the realities of what is likely to occur in the future.
Good point, Marty. I appreciate it. That's a very good
Yeah.
point. Anyone else? Before I close it up, I I just wanted to hear from Andrew if he has anything more to add from the Batavia Environmental Commission.
I don't think I do at this time. No, thank you.
All right, thank you, Andrew. And Bill Scown, I see you're still with us. Any last comments before we go into something else here?
No.
Okay, well, I appreciate you
Mike.
guys sitting in here all evening. And
Mike, can I ask a question? This is Nick.
yeah, Nick, please do.
For Gary, we jumped over since you were going to rework it, the prior legislative funding. I just have one quick question. We were looking at B, Batavia also supports customer-funded programs. We're making kind of an assumption that means it's, ComEd and other municipalities, but that's kind of a vague statement, customer-funded programs. I mean, if CEJA goes through, we're going to have our own customer-funded program, aren't we?
Yeah, that's a very good point. It's written in the context of the Clean Union Jobs Act language, but.
Okay, so
just taken on
they're
its
aware
own.
of that terminology.
Yeah, if just taken on its own, though, I understand exactly what you're saying, so we do need to make sure that's clear. I agree
Mike,
with you.
Okay, that's all I had.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe. Thank you, Nick.
Along the same lines under the legislative funding, something I like that's in item C is the very first sentence. City of Batavia opposes a one-size-fits-all funding approach. That sentence could just about go in any of the four and not be objectionable. I'm wondering if when you rewrite that legislative funding statement, that would get included as well.
That's, yeah, that, I think that's great.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you, Joe. I mean, these are good points everyone's bringing forward. I mean, we can continue bringing more forward. I wish if anyone has anything to offer, please bring it forward.
Or reach out to me too. I mean,
Yes.
I'll be drafting and coming back to the committee next week to again, kind of vet this through. I think the city's goal remains that we want to get something to our legislators by early May, because come late May, they're going to be making decisions,
So, all right, well, we'll be doing this again, probably with a little more clarity. I thought tonight was a good night.
We keep
we
honing
keep
it
kind
down.
of
Right.
getting it more and more focused, so.
Right,
yep.
so I think tonight was a good night, and we'll do this again next Tuesday night. I appreciate everyone's input. Tony, you are quite the negotiator. So,
Thank you, Mike.
Well done.
so thank you. And thank you for everyone. A lot of good insights, very incisive. So we'll
Yeah,
turn.
the next time we're negotiating contracts, if Tony shows up at the other side of the table, I'm going to be a little nervous.
So we'll end the discussion. We'll pick that up again next week. If anything has anything to add, kindly just get that off to Gary and Laura, please. And we'll go then now to item number 10, project status. And I'm going to say one last thing before we leave. I want to just give thanks to Gary, Gary Holm, because Gary really has done the lion's share of work here on this and made it, it's very difficult to fully wrap your head around all this electricity and the PPAs and, the base loads, and Gary has it handled, and he makes it easier for us all to understand, which I very much appreciate, and offer thanks to Gary Holm for that.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, we'll go to item number 10, project status.
Okay, so we ended our first quarter of our new strategic plan for 2021-23 at the end of March, and I was working on a different format. In our previous strategic action plan, we had a kind of a massive spreadsheet that was a little bit difficult to determine where you were at as you move through the columns on that spreadsheet. So I tried to organize it into this PowerPoint presentation that we can continue to update on a quarterly basis, and then add in new sheets for the subsequent years as well. And I would love to have your feedback on the new format. But I'd just like to go through this, if I can figure out how to advance slides. There we go. Okay, so I'll just hide the floating meeting controls. As you know, we had broken our we have 5 different areas of focus. And the first of those is economic vitality, and we identified 4 objectives in that area to hire a business development manager, to actively market Batavia to new businesses, to promote opportunities for downtown redevelopment and work and cultivate new projects such as One Washington Place, and to continue to implement aspects of our streetscape plan. On this next page, I know this is incredibly hard to read on the PowerPoint up here, but as I said, we'll post this on our strategic action plan page as the quarterly update, and people can kind of pick it up and read it at their leisure. With regard to the business development manager, we advertised the position in March, and we plan to hire that individual, bring them on board in the second quarter. In marketing Batavia, our communication manager, Griffin Price, and worked with the finance department to produce the budget in brief, which is a summary of not only our budget process, but the various aspects of our budget in summary and overview fashion. Also, the strategic action plan and a list of the important capital improvement projects that we have facing us in 2021. And it is primarily meant as a way to summarize this information for our residents, but it also really highlights the things that are going on in Batavia in the coming year for businesses that are also thinking of perhaps locating here as well. Promotion of downtown development in January. Tips number 6 was established, and yesterday, City Council approved the last step prior to the developer being able to secure their financing and move forward with completion of the bid drawings necessary to apply for their business permit. Staff have also been in talk with a number of other developers who are interested in similar projects in other areas of our downtown, meaning mixed-use developments of both residential and commercial uses. And then on streetscape, have to give propers to Alderman Beck, who continues to move forward with the Streetscape Advisory Committee. They met in February and came up with a plan to address as priorities 3 areas of our downtown: the corridor, which are the South Batavia Avenue businesses, Water Street, and the intersection of Prairie and Wilson Street. And following that, Alderman Beck set up meetings with stakeholders, and 2 of those meetings have already happened, the one with Water Street and also the one with Corridor. And then we're looking forward to the meeting with the stakeholders on Prairie Street and Wilson Street. Does anybody have any questions about the economic vitality objectives? Okay, I will move on to the transportation objectives. To continue to pursue implementation of a road diet on Route 31, add sharrows and bike lanes, and to collaborate with the Batavia Bicycle Commission on development of an active transportation plan. With regard to the road diet, we were disappointed to hear that we didn't receive the grant that we applied for to fund the initial engineering study, but we do have the dollars for that in the budget in 2021, and we'll move forward with that in the second quarter. The first aspect of that would be to conduct a traffic study necessary to prove to the Illinois Department of Transportation that a road diet is appropriate for Batavia Avenue. But we did have something come up that was kind of a great thing we did not realize, but somebody at KDOT pointed out to us that CMAP had done a study in 2018 suggesting in its a report on traffic safety that Batavia Avenue from Fabian Parkway all the way to Route 56 down in North Aurora would be an appropriate area for a road diet. So that might help us in supporting this project to Illinois Department of Transportation. With regard to sharrows and bike lanes, we still have to conduct the study of how many miles of these we have already, how many are needed, and the cost to add. However, the Batavia Bicycle Commission, once I attended one of their meetings, and one of the things that they have proposed is to, for changes in signage and additional signage that would make our existing bike lanes safer and more appropriately signed. So instead of a share the road, it is an indication that bikes have the right to use the lane on these narrow roads that might not have sufficient shoulder to accommodate a bike lane. And so following the Batavia Bicycle Commission's presentation to City Council, Public Works studied the cost of that, and I think shortly we will be coming back to City Council with the results of that and a recommendation for a path forward. We also had an opportunity to discuss a little bit with the Bicycle Commission at their meeting we're going to look at an active transportation plan this year, understanding that that is something that really has to be looked at in the context of an overall, the city's comprehensive plan. And so in the second quarter, we'll try to come up with some concrete timelines of how we want to go about attacking the active transportation plan in the context of also looking at our comprehensive plan probably needs a reboot itself. Any questions on the transportation objectives? Okay, I will move on to infrastructure objectives. And all very related items here. On the one hand, develop an infrastructure funding policy, and in conjunction with that, to review the service level expectations. I think those are two things that really go hand in hand, that we have a number of projects that we can see on the horizon, and that the current budget does not allow for those things to be accomplished without identifying funding sources. And so we have plans to take a look at that mid-year so that we can incorporate that into our budget planning, not only for the coming year, but over the next several years. And then the other infrastructure objective that we had was to enhance the safety of bikers and walkers in our neighborhoods. So in quarter one, not much activity on those first two objectives, because really mid-year is when we're going to be taking a look at that. But as for traffic calming, the city is going to launch a repeat of its Slow Down campaign. We expect those signs to arrive as early as tomorrow. And when they're here, we'll do an information campaign for people so that we can get those placed in yards as the kids have been headed back to school and the end of the school year is coming. In future quarters, we are going to be researching potential calming measures that have been implemented in other jurisdictions and bring these ideas back to City Council for consideration. And river objectives, very timely thing to be talking about tonight. The first of which is to create a master plan for the development of our riverfront, actively market riverfront development opportunities, and identify inexpensive ways to capitalize on having a river in the heart of our downtown. As for the river master plan, that process is well underway, and it's been really great working with Hitchcock. They have set forth a plan, and so far we are meeting our timelines in that plan. The first round of stakeholder input will begin with the citywide online survey, and they are also conducting in-person focus groups with 30 different stakeholders. Those meetings are this Thursday and next Tuesday. As for marketing the riverfront development, we look for this to be a priority project for the incoming economic development manager. And I have discussed with Allison, the executive director at the Park District, ways that we might be able to collaborate on the objective of finding some engaging activities that are inexpensive ways for our residents to have more focus on our river, engage with our river, and just make it more of a focal point for us. And then lastly, in 2021, 2023 action plan is our diversity objective, to create and adopt a diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. And right now, we are in our research phase to take a look at what some other cities' plans that they have adopted, and what was the process that they used to implement their plans. So by conducting that research, we hope to, by the third quarter, come up with a plan for how we will go about adopting our own diversity, equity, and inclusion program for the city of Batavia. And that's the quarterly update for our strategic action plan.
Okay. And what else do we have then following that? Anyone have another? Item 11. Thank you, Laura. Any others from anyone? No others? Well, then, I guess executive session we have tonight. So do we need a motion to go into executive session?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone care to make a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Miller, second by Barron. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.